Holden Whitmore stood in the observation pen at Whitmore Champion Genetics in Amarillo, Texas, watching 3,400 pounds of pure rage destroy a reinforced steel gate. Nabid, a 4-year-old Charolais bull with bloodlines worth $200,000 on paper, slammed his massive head into the gate again, bending the metal like it was aluminum foil. His white coat was slick with sweat despite the November cold. His eyes showed white all around, the look of an animal past reasoning, past training, past any hope of commercial use. "He's done," Holden said to his head cattle manager, Vernon Hayes. "4th gate this month. 3rd handler he's charged. I can't keep him." Vernon, 58 and carrying scars from 30 years handling breeding bulls, nodded reluctantly. "Shame. His genetics are flawless. Sire was Frost King, $500,000 proven producer. Dam's line goes back to Canadian champions. On paper, Nabid should be generating $250,000 annually in breeding fees. On paper doesn't matter when he's trying to kill anyone who enters his pen." Holden pulled out his phone, scrolling through contacts. "I've got Bryce Carmichael in Oklahoma looking at him next week. If Bryce passes, we're out of options. Nobody wants a bull this aggressive, no matter how good his genetics are." Nabid had been a problem from the beginning. Born at Whitmore Champion Genetics 3 years ago, he'd shown exceptional growth rates and perfect conformation. Everything elite breeders wanted. But as he matured, his temperament became increasingly volatile. He'd attack handlers without provocation, destroy equipment, and showed zero tolerance for the standard handling procedures used in commercial breeding operations. Whitmore had tried everything: different handlers, modified facilities, hormone treatments to reduce aggression, consultation with animal behaviorists specializing in cattle. Nothing worked. Nabid remained dangerously unpredictable. "The problem," Vernon said, watching Nabid pace the pen, "is that he's too smart. Most aggressive bulls are just reactive. Startled easy, defensive. Nabid thinks. He plans. Watch him." Holden watched. Nabid was indeed different from typical aggressive cattle. He wasn't randomly violent. He was strategic. He'd wait until handlers were positioned poorly, then strike. He'd test fences methodically, finding weak points. He showed problem-solving intelligence that was fascinating in theory, but terrifying in practice. "Smart bulls are dangerous bulls in commercial operations," Holden said. "We need predictable, manageable animals. Nabid's too volatile for artificial insemination programs, too aggressive for natural breeding with supervised pens. He's a liability, not an asset." 1 week later, Bryce Carmichael arrived from Oklahoma, a legendary cattleman who'd built his reputation handling difficult animals. If anyone could evaluate Nabid's potential, it was Bryce. Bryce watched Nabid for 2 hours without speaking. Finally, "He's magnificent. Absolutely perfect conformation. Those genetics would revolutionize any breeding program." "But," Holden prompted, "but he's fundamentally unsuitable for standard operations. Look at how he reacts to confinement." Bryce pointed to Nabid, who was methodically testing every section of his pen's perimeter. "He's not aggressive because he's mean. He's aggressive because he can't tolerate the restrictions of modern breeding facilities. He's claustrophobic, basically, psychologically unsuited for confined commercial breeding." "So your verdict?" "Pass. I can't use him." Bryce's tone was regretful. In a different era, maybe, when bulls ran free-range with herds on open prairie, Nabid would have been perfect. But modern breeding requires bulls to tolerate small pens, artificial insemination facilities, constant human handling. He'll never accept that. Someone's going to get killed trying to work him. After Bryce left, Holden made the decision he'd been avoiding. "Vernon, contact livestock disposal services. Get quotes for processing Nabid. We can't sell him. Too much liability risk. We can't keep him. Too expensive and dangerous. He goes to slaughter next month." Vernon looked pained but nodded. "I'll make the calls." That evening, Vernon sat in his office reviewing options when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Margot Vance, a livestock transport coordinator he'd worked with for years. "Vernon, I heard through the network you've got a Charolais bull you're disposing of. Big animal, aggressive temperament." "Yeah, Nabid. Why?" "I've got a sanctuary in Anchorage, Alaska, Northern Lights Animal Refuge. They take livestock that can't be commercially placed. They've got 800 acres, minimal confinement facilities. They specifically requested large ungulates for their education programs. Would Whitmore donate instead of processing? Vernon considered. Donation meant a tax write-off, better optics than slaughter, and a potential home for Nabid. Let me talk to Holden. Holden agreed immediately. Sanctuary sounds perfect. Gets him off our liability. We get the donation deduction, and maybe in an open environment with minimal handling he'll calm down. Make it happen. Margot arranged everything: specialized livestock transport, veterinary health certificates, coordination with Northern Lights Animal Refuge. Nabid would travel by truck to Seattle, then ferry to Alaska, arriving in Anchorage 3 weeks later. The paperwork was complex. Multiple documents, shipping manifests, destination addresses, contact information for the receiving facility. And that's where the mistake happened. Margot's assistant, rushing to meet transport deadlines, transposed 2 digits in the receiving facility's address code. Instead of Northern Lights Animal Refuge in Anchorage, facility code AK9072847, the manifest listed AK9072487, which corresponded to a completely different location in Alaska. A small tourist ranch in Talkeetna, 115 miles north of Anchorage, owned by a former bush pilot named Silas Crow, who ran seasonal wilderness tours and kept a handful of horses and a few cattle for authentic frontier experience photo opportunities. Silas Crow, who had 0 experience with breeding bulls, 0 facilities for handling aggressive animals, and 0 knowledge that 3,400 pounds of rejected, unpredictable Chevrolet Fury was currently on a truck heading straight for his property. The truck left Amarillo on November 15th. Nabid was coming to Talkeetna, and nobody knew it was a mistake. Silas Crow was fixing fence wire on his north pasture when he heard the truck rumbling up his access road. November 22nd, early afternoon, 15 degrees Fahrenheit with snow threatening in gray clouds. At 51, Silas had the weathered look of 2 decades flying bush planes across Alaska before buying 40 acres outside Talkeetna 6 years ago. Now he ran Crow's Edge wilderness tours, horseback rides, wildlife viewing, authentic Alaska ranch experience for tourists. 6 horses, 3 beef cattle, modest income that covered winter expenses. He wasn't expecting deliveries. A large livestock hauler marked Vance Transport Services pulled up. The driver climbed down with a clipboard. Silas Crow? That's me. Got a delivery. 1 Chevrolet bull, 4 years old. Sign here. Silas stared. I didn't order a bull. The driver checked paperwork. Says here AK9072487 Crow's Edge Ranch, Talkeetna. That's you, right? That's my address, but... Look, I've driven this animal from Texas through Canada up the Alaska Highway. 3 weeks in transit. I need to unload him now. Whatever the confusion is, sort it out with the shipper. The driver walked toward the trailer. Where do you want him? Wait, how big is this bull? 300-400 pounds. Mean as hell, according to notes. Took 4 guys to load him in Amarillo. You got proper containment? Ice formed in Silas's gut. No, I've got 40 acres with standard fence wire. I don't run breeding operations, just tourism cattle for photos. Not my problem. Manifest says deliver here. You refuse, I drive him back to Anchorage and deal with legal disputes. Your call. Before Silas could respond, Buck Tolliver's pickup arrived. Buck, 62-year-old former trapper who worked as ranch hand, climbed out and whistled at the trailer. Boss, please tell me, that's not what I think. Giant bull. Didn't order it. Probably wrong address. The driver was impatient. Unloading in 5 minutes, whether you're ready or not. Silas made the decision. Buck, open the north pasture gate. We'll unload him there, contact whoever sent him, arrange proper transport. Should be sorted in a day or 2. Unloading Nabid was controlled chaos. Buck positioned his truck to create a chute from trailer to pasture. The driver opened the rear door cautiously. Nabid exploded out like a cannonball. 3,400 pounds of white Chevrolet hit the ground running, charged 30 feet, spun around, and bellowed, thunder echoing off mountains. His massive head swung side to side, evaluating this new environment. Jesus, Buck breathed. Look at the size. Nabid was enormous, shoulder height nearly 6 feet, wall of muscle covered in white hide, horns partially filed but still formidable. But what struck Silas most wasn't size. It was Nabid's eyes. Sharp, alert, intelligent. Not dull like typical beef cattle. Nabid was assessing everything: fence line, terrain, humans, distant mountains. "That's not a normal bull," Silas said quietly. The driver climbed back in his cab. "Good luck. Paperwork's on the clipboard. Someone will call about pickup." He drove away. Silas and Buck watched Nabid explore the 40-acre pasture, investigating every corner, testing fence wire with his head at multiple points. "That fence won't hold him if he decides to leave," Buck observed. "He could walk through it." "Let's hope he doesn't." Silas checked the paperwork. "I'll call Vance Transport, find out what's happening." He dialed. Voicemail. Left a message about unexpected delivery and possible address error. No response. He tried the shipper contact, Whitmore Champion Genetics in Texas. Another voicemail. "Office closed for Thanksgiving holiday. Will return calls Monday." It was Wednesday. Monday was 5 days away. "We're babysitting a giant bull through Thanksgiving," Buck said. "Looks that way." Silas watched Nabid staring at the mountains. "Get hay and water out there. Keep him comfortable until this gets sorted." Over 24 hours, Silas and Buck observed Nabid carefully. What they noticed was strange. Nabid wasn't aggressive. He wasn't charging fences or attacking infrastructure. He was calm. Calmer than paperwork suggested. "Shipping notes say this bull is dangerously aggressive," Silas said Thursday morning, watching Nabid graze peacefully. "Attacked handlers, destroyed facilities. But look at him." "Maybe exhausted from travel," Buck suggested. 3 weeks in a trailer takes it out of any animal. But exhaustion didn't explain how Nabid moved through the space. Not frantically, not defensively, but with something like contentment. He'd pace the perimeter each morning, then spend hours near the fence closest to mountains, just watching Alaska wilderness stretch before him. "It's like he's never seen this much space," Buck observed. That evening, Silas's daughter Nessa arrived from Anchorage for Thanksgiving break. 19, studying wildlife biology at University of Alaska. "Dad, why is there a massive white bull in our pasture?" "Shipping mistake. Gets picked up next week." Nessa walked to the fence, studying Nabid with a biologist's eye. "That's a Charolais, expensive breeding stock. What's he doing here?" "Being temporarily warehoused." Nessa watched Nabid for several minutes. "Dad, notice his behavior? He's not acting like confined cattle typically act." "What do you mean?" "Most cattle from commercial operations show stereotypical behaviors when confined: pacing, fence testing, aggression. But look at him. He's exploring, investigating, engaging. That's behavior you see in animals with environmental enrichment and space." "Where'd he come from?" "Texas, some Champion Genetics facility. Then he's probably spent his whole life in small breeding pens, confined spaces." Nessa turned to her father. "Dad, I think this bull isn't aggressive by nature. I think he was aggressive because he was confined in ways his psychology couldn't handle. And now that he's in open space..." "He's fine," Silas finished, understanding. They watched Nabid stand at the fence line, looking at Denali's snow-covered peak backlit by setting sun. For the first time in his life, Nabid had room to breathe, and everything was about to change. Monday morning, Silas finally reached Margot Vance at the transport company. "Mr. Crow, I'm so sorry. There's been a terrible mistake." Margot's voice was mortified. "Nabid was supposed to go to Northern Lights Animal Refuge in Anchorage. My assistant transposed digits in the facility code. You received a bull meant for a sanctuary." "So what happens now?" "We're arranging pickup, but there's a complication. Northern Lights just called. They've had an outbreak of respiratory illness in their cattle population. State veterinarian quarantined the entire facility. They can't accept any new animals for at least 6 weeks." Silas felt his stomach drop. 6 weeks? Whitmore Champion Genetics in Texas donated Nabid because he's too aggressive for commercial breeding. They won't take him back. Liability issues. Northern Lights can't take him yet. And frankly, Mr. Crow, nobody else wants a 3,400-pound aggressive bull. He's not aggressive here. Margot paused. What? Nabid. He's been here 5 days. He's calm, peaceful. My daughter's a wildlife biology student. She thinks he was aggressive in Texas because of confinement stress. In open space, he's completely different. That's consistent with what the behaviorist in Texas suggested. But Mr. Crow, I can't legally leave him with you permanently. You don't have facilities for breeding bulls, insurance coverage. I'm not keeping him permanently, but if he needs temporary housing for 6 weeks until the sanctuary opens, he can stay here. I'll sign whatever liability waivers you need. Margot sounded relieved. I'll draft temporary custody papers. Whitmore will cover feed costs. This solves a major problem, Mr. Crow. Thank you. After hanging up, Silas walked to the north pasture where Buck was spreading hay. Nabid stood nearby, watching but not approaching. Boss, you see what he's doing? Buck pointed. Over the past days, Nabid had established a routine. Mornings, he'd walk the entire fence perimeter, not testing it aggressively, but surveying his territory. Then he'd graze near the southwest corner with a view of Denali. Afternoons, he'd rest near a cluster of spruce trees sheltered from wind. He's adapting, Silas said. Creating patterns. That's what healthy animals do in appropriate environments. He's also changing physically, Buck observed. Look at his posture. First day, he was tense, head up, muscles tight, ready to charge. Now he's relaxed, moves different. It was true. Nabid's body language had transformed. The wild-eyed, volatile bull from the trailer had become an animal that moved with calm confidence through his space. That afternoon, Rowan Pike arrived, the local large animal veterinarian. At 44, Rowan had spent 20 years treating everything from sled dogs to moose in Alaska's challenging conditions. Silas called about a health check on a Charolais bull. She climbed out of her truck carrying her medical kit. Yeah, want to make sure he's healthy after the transport stress. Rowan approached the fence, studying Nabid from a distance. That's a magnificent animal. Where'd he come from? Texas. Long story involving shipping mistakes and sanctuary quarantines. Rowan spent 30 minutes observing Nabid before entering the pasture. She moved slowly, deliberately, giving him space to adjust to her presence. Nabid watched her but didn't charge or show aggression. His body condition is good, Rowan said, checking him from a safe distance with binoculars. No obvious injuries or illness, respiratory rate normal. He's alert and responsive but not agitated. She lowered the binoculars. Silas, I've read about Nabid. Whitmore Champion Genetics published a case study on him 6 months ago. Management challenges with high-intelligence breeding stock. He was considered dangerously unpredictable. He's not unpredictable here. No, he's not. Which suggests the problem was never Nabid. It was the environment. Rowan made notes. Commercial breeding facilities are designed for efficiency. Small pens, constant handling, artificial insemination. For most cattle, that's fine. But some animals, particularly high-intelligence individuals, can't tolerate that level of restriction. They develop severe stress behaviors that look like aggression. So what happened here? You gave him 40 acres, minimal human interaction, and environmental complexity. Everything Texas couldn't provide. Rowan looked at Nabid, who was grazing peacefully. He's not a dangerous bull. He's a bull who was kept in the wrong conditions. Nessa joined them, back from a morning hike. Dr. Pike, I've been documenting his behavior for a class project. Can I show you something? She pulled out her phone, showing video footage. This is Nabid on day 2. Watch how he investigates the fence line. He's not testing it to escape. He's learning the boundaries. And here, day 4, see how he's created distinct zones. Feeding area, resting area, observation point. That's sophisticated environmental use. Rowan reviewed the footage. This is remarkable. He's exhibiting complex spatial behavior. Most commercial cattle don't develop this because they never have enough space to establish territories. There's more, Nessa said. Yesterday, a moose cow and calf passed along the northern fence. Nabid watched them for 20 minutes. Didn't charge, didn't display aggression. Just observed. He's interested in his environment. Because for the first time, he has an environment worth being interested in, Rowan said. That evening, Silas received a call from Holden Whitmore in Texas. Mr. Crow, Margot Vance told me about the shipping error and that you've agreed to house Nabid temporarily. I want to be clear. That bull is extremely dangerous. We've had multiple incidents. Mr. Whitmore, Nabid's been here a week. 0 incidents, 0 aggression. Silence on the line. Then, that's impossible. It's documented. My daughter's filming him for a university wildlife behavior project. I've got a veterinarian who examined him. He's calm, healthy, and completely manageable. Mr. Crow, we spent 2 years trying to manage that bull. 4 different handlers, consultation with behaviorists. Nothing worked. Maybe because you were trying to manage him in the wrong environment. Silas kept his voice respectful but firm. How much space did Nabid have in Texas? Standard breeding pen, 12 by 16 feet. 12 by 16 feet for a 3,400-pound bull? That's industry standard for AI facilities. Mr. Whitmore, Nabid has 40 acres here. Mountains, weather, space to move. He's a different animal. Another long silence. I'd like to see documentation, video, vet reports, behavioral observations. I'll send everything. After hanging up, Silas walked to the pasture fence. Nabid stood in his usual evening spot, silhouetted against Denali's sunset-lit peak. You were never the problem, were you? Silas said quietly. They just put you in the wrong place. Nabid turned his massive head, looking directly at Silas for a long moment, then returned to watching the mountains. 2 weeks after Silas sent documentation to Texas, Holden Whitmore arrived in Talkeetna unannounced. I need to see this myself, Holden said, standing in Silas's driveway on a cold December morning. Everything you sent contradicts 2 years of data we have on Nabid. See for yourself. Silas led him to the north pasture. Nabid stood near the spruce tree cluster, breath steaming in the 15-degree air. When he saw Holden, his head lifted, recognition registering. His posture shifted slightly, muscles tensing. He remembers you, Silas observed. He remembers what I represent, Holden said quietly. Confinement. Restriction. They watched in silence for 10 minutes. Nabid didn't charge, didn't show aggression, just watched Holden warily while maintaining distance. This doesn't make sense, Holden finally said. In Texas, he'd have charged by now, destroyed the fence trying to get at me. Because in Texas, he had nowhere to go. Here, he can move away. He has choice. Rowan Pike arrived with updated veterinary reports. Mr. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Pike. I've been monitoring Nabid since arrival. His stress hormone levels are 60% lower than baseline readings from your facility in Texas. Holden read the report, his expression shifting from skepticism to something like wonder. 60% reduction? His cortisol levels indicate an animal experiencing environmental enrichment rather than chronic stress. Mr. Whitmore, Nabid isn't aggressive by nature. He's intelligent, and intelligence in confined spaces produces behavioral problems that look like aggression. Nessa appeared with her laptop, showing Holden 3 weeks of behavioral footage. Watch how he navigates space, how he's established routines, how he responds to environmental stimuli. This is a psychologically healthy animal. Holden watched, transfixed. Finally, we were wrong. We tried to force a highly intelligent bull into a system designed for average intelligence animals. We failed to recognize that his aggression was actually psychological distress. What happens now? Silas asked. Northern Lights Sanctuary opens in 4 weeks. Legally, Nabid should go there as originally intended. Holden paused. But Mr. Crow, I've seen what you've accomplished here. If you were willing to keep him permanently, if we could arrange proper legal custody, insurance, compensation for feed and care, would you consider it? Silas looked at Nabid, who'd returned to grazing peacefully. I'm not a breeding operation. I can't generate revenue from him. That's not the point anymore. The point is, Nabid has value beyond commercial breeding. He represents something important, proof that animal behavior problems often reflect environmental failures, not inherent defects. Holden's voice was earnest. I'll cover all costs, feed, veterinary, facility improvements. I'll fund a study through the University of Alaska documenting his rehabilitation. This could change how the industry thinks about managing difficult animals, Silas considered. I'd need to expand fencing, improve shelter, hire additional help. I'll fund everything, and I'll pay you $3,000 monthly as care compensation. Why? Because I spent 2 years trying to fix Nabid when the problem was never him. It was us. The least I can do is fund his life in an environment where he can thrive. That evening, Silas sat with Buck and Nessa discussing the offer. It's good money, Buck said, and the bull's no trouble. It changes the nature of the ranch, Silas countered. We'd be responsible for him long term. Dad, this is bigger than business, Nessa said. Nabid's story could influence animal welfare policy, academic research, industry practices. He's proof that what we label as dangerous or unmanageable is often just incompatible with current systems. Silas walked to the pasture fence. Nabid stood in his usual spot, watching Denali's peak catch the last sunlight. The bull rejected by every breeding operation in the country. The animal everyone called dangerous. The mistake that ended up in exactly the right place. All right, Silas said. He stays. 6 months later, Nabid stood in an expanded 70-acre pasture as a film crew from the University of Alaska documented his behavior for a research study titled Environmental Enrichment and Behavioral Modification in High-Intelligence Cattle. Silas watched from the fence line with Nessa, now leading the research project as part of her senior thesis. The data is remarkable, Nessa said, reviewing her laptop. Nabid's stress markers remain 65% below Texas baseline. He's gained 200 pounds of healthy weight, 0 aggressive incidents in 6 months. And look, she pointed to the pasture where Nabid was calmly grazing alongside Silas's 3 original beef cattle, integrated peacefully into the small herd. He's socializing. In Texas, they couldn't keep him with other animals. He'd attack them. Here, he's part of the group. Holden Whitmore had kept his promise. He'd funded fence expansion, built a reinforced shelter, paid for Buck's full-time employment, and covered all veterinary costs. More importantly, he'd used Nabid's story to advocate for industry reform. Whitmore Champion Genetics announced policy changes last month, Silas told Nessa. They're redesigning facilities to provide more space for high-intelligence breeding stock, reducing confinement time, implementing environmental enrichment protocols. They're citing Nabid's case as proof that behavioral problems are often environmental, not genetic. 3 other breeding operations have contacted me about consulting on similar cases, Nessa added. Bulls that were labeled aggressive and scheduled for slaughter. We're arranging evaluations to see if environmental changes could rehabilitate them. Rowan Pike arrived with a journalist from Alaska Magazine doing a feature story. The bull that nobody wanted, how a shipping mistake revolutionized animal welfare. Dr. Pike, how significant is Nabid's transformation? The journalist asked. It challenges fundamental assumptions about animal behavior management, Rowan said. For decades, the industry has treated behavioral problems as individual animal defects, requiring correction or elimination. Nabid proves that many problem animals are actually normal animals in problem environments. Change the environment, change the behavior. The journalist interviewed Silas. What's it like caring for an animal that was considered too dangerous to keep alive? Humbling, Silas said honestly. Nabid isn't dangerous. He never was. He was just an intelligent animal trapped in circumstances that didn't match his needs. The moment those circumstances changed, so did he. What's next for Nabid? He lives here permanently. This is his home now. That evening, as winter darkness settled over Talkeetna, Silas stood at the pasture fence watching Nabid in his usual spot, silhouetted against snow-covered mountains, breath steaming in cold air. Buck joined him. Boss, you realize that shipping mistake might have saved that bull's life? Saved his life and changed a lot of others. Silas thought about the breeding operations now redesigning facilities, the research papers being published, the policy discussions happening in agricultural circles. All because someone transposed 2 digits in an address code. Sometimes mistakes turn out to be exactly what needed to happen. Nabid turned his massive head toward them, made a low sound, not aggressive, almost conversational, then returned to his mountain vigil. The bull everyone rejected. The animal nobody wanted. The mistake that taught an entire industry that sometimes the problem isn't the animal, it's the cage we've built around them. In Talkeetna, Alaska, 115 miles north of where he was supposed to end up, Nabeed had found something the breeding operations could never provide: space to be himself, freedom to exist without constant restriction, and humans willing to meet him where he was, rather than forcing him to be what they needed. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. And in doing so, he'd proven that what we call impossible is often just improbable given current conditions, and that changing those conditions can transform everything. Silas headed back to the house, leaving Nabeed to his evening routine. Behind him, the giant white bull stood peacefully in the Alaska darkness, watching the mountains that had become his sanctuary. Home, at last.